Hey, this is Stephen Platinum, your friend in wrestling with Ask Platinum number 3. Got a question from a guy, I'm assuming it's a guy, who calls himself Smart Marky Mark, that's terrible. His question, though, is a very simple one that requires a much more in-depth answer, in my opinion, and his question is, I saw on the July 8th episode of NXT, they are going to have a title versus title match where they're making it sound as if one of the champions will walk away with both titles. I looked into this because I don't really watch NXT, and I guess it's for their North American title, which is up for grabs in a match soon, and then that winner will face, I would suppose, Adam Cole, who's the NXT champion. Anyway, back to the question. What do you think of the practice of NXT trying to take away from AEW's Fyter Fest show? Question mark. That question is very easy to answer, but it does open up something else for me to talk about that I think is much more interesting. Sorry to step on your question. They're competing with each other, so they're allowed to do whatever they can to try to beat the other one. That's not a problem. Does anybody begrudge AEW for continuing to do a good job and improving and announcing their cards in advance and all the things that you're supposed to be doing? Do they consider that an attack on NXT? I think it's very strange. I think the second that NXT took the same time slot, the fight is on. And at that point, it is a competition, no matter how one side may try to paint it or not. And your job is to win. And so, because Fyter Fest has been announced for July 1st and July 8th, and it's going to be a pay-per-view style and caliber of show for 2 weeks. Is NXT just supposed to acquiesce and go, okay, well, we're not going to do a thing? Or are they almost obligated on the second night of Fyter Fest, which is July 8th, to come up with something really big? And then presumably on July 1st, there'll be something really big, which will set the stage for July 8th. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. My God, where have we gotten where that's even a debate? We should just be excited that they're forced to compete with each other and get better. Here's what it does indicate, though, that for all of the lip service and surface things that both of them say, and AEW has said, we're not focused on beating NXT, we're worrying about ourselves. And NXT has said through Triple H and others that, we're in this for the long haul. We're not going for single week victories. We're here for the long term, implying that AEW somehow is not. They're both full of shit to an extent. This is a fight that they're pretending isn't a fight. And I get from AEW's point of view why you would want to say that. Because, again, that way, when you do lose the ratings for a week or two in a row, which has happened, overall it's been AEW, though they're winning the much more important battle every time, which is the demographic one, which is a problem the WWE just seems unable to solve. Even on NXT, which you would think would lend itself towards younger fan base, it doesn't really, because the WWE has lost their younger fan base by and large, right? So for AEW, of course, it's got to be we're focusing on, it's all steam's ahead. But the improvements that I see in the show, to me, are a direct reflection of we're competing with the WWE. And Eric Bischoff, for all of his faults, has said a number of really smart things about wrestling. And one of them is you got to be better, or you got to be worse, or you got to go different. And I think with Dark, they're going different. It's a wrestling heavy show, and it's on YouTube, but they're making that show a viable show, and they're doing it by making it different, right? In terms of number of viewers, it can't be better. They certainly don't want that show to be labeled worse, so they're going different, and I think it's smart. And AEW with their Dynamite show, they're going to go better as far as ratings go, and then they're going to go different as far as presentation goes. Now for NXT, the stakes are higher, but they're much more symbolic. Right? It's a WWE product, so all the sunk costs are already in, right? So they've got all these guys under contract already. There's a certain amount of money it's going to cost to produce. They're not going to get a live gate. And I think even when things kind of get going again, live gates for the WWE are not a factor any longer, right? So NXT, but here's why in the long term it probably wasn't the move to go directly up against Dynamite, because they are losing and they are acknowledging AEW by engaging in the competition, which is something they normally don't do, right? It's TNA who try to rekindle the Monday Night Wars. It's WCW that went up against them on Monday nights, right? But for the WWE to initiate the conflict and acknowledge another group after not doing it really for decades shows that they've made a bad move. Because AEW is now a viable part of the conversation in a way that even TNA never was. And I know AEW has not approached the highest ratings for TNA. But they're doing something that's much bigger, which is they're engaging in sort of long-term thinking. They're continuing to tinker and experiment. And I honestly feel like they're one or two moves away from reaching a much bigger thing. And they've put themselves in a much better position. People are rooting for AEW. Nobody's rooting for the WWE. Not really. The WWE has not done themselves any favors publicity-wise, right? Almost everything they do is cast in a negative light. Now, we can argue about the media and all that stuff, but the simple fact is the WWE is seen as the bully, is seen as a pale imitation of what it once was, and mired in a creative funk. For all of AEW's faults, and they are there, none of those things really apply beyond the fact that there does seem to be a bit of a creative malaise. And there is this feeling, at least by me, that there needs to be an adult in the room to tell them no on some of these things. Certainly, I don't think anybody was incredibly heartened when it was revealed that, Tony Khan was going to be the head of creative, de facto head of creative. I don't think that's really inspiring to people because there's this feeling that they're just, you just need to have a wrestling guy in there in some capacity to clean up the little things. Of course, I think that should be me, but that's neither here nor there. So to me, the answer to the question is, of course, it's cool for NXT to compete with AEW, and that's a good thing for AEW, honestly. But the bigger thing is it shows that all of the lip service is just that we're not competing. They most certainly are, and they most certainly should. And they got into the battle. The art of war and Sun Tzu, war is based, and then Noam Chomsky sort of heightened and furthered this idea, but it's wars are based on misunderstandings. And I think WWE, by putting NXT directly up against them, definitely read the battlefield wrong. And the one thing the WWE/WWF had always done was they had done a stellar job of reading the battlefield beforehand. But in this case, they did not. And the WWE all of a sudden looks very mortal. And all of a sudden, all of these things that you never would have entertained before, rumor-wise, now you clearly do. Things like the WWE will sell, or the WWE is people are interested in buying it. You notice how quickly those rumors went away, but they came up like a storm because it seemed very probable. Because there's a perception that the WWE is a low thing that should, I mean, how many people told me Vince McMahon should get out while the getting's good? Wow. Have you ever heard that said about the WWE/F before? Even in the mid to early 90s when it was not doing well and they were losing money and then they're engaging in this Monday Night War, did anybody entertain the notion that the WWF would sell? And I think it's very telling that they do now. And the Performance Center and NXT and Triple H by proxy, which were always declared these are wonderful things, and the takeover shows are so unbelievable, and it's so great, and NXT being its own brand is wonderful. Now, all of a sudden, that's cast into doubt as well. Of, yeah, but have they really put out a huge top-level star? To the point where the one marked success of the Performance Center, which has been the women's division, and the women have gone on. And granted, a lot of them have been booked terribly on the big shows, quote unquote, but then they've managed to pull out of that and continue to be a viable and important part of those shows. Now I hear people questioning whether the rise of women is responsible for part of WWE's overall ratings woes. Again, there's so many cracks in the foundation, and a lot of them are perception, but those perceptions are creating really big problems for the WWE and NXT by proxy. I find it really fascinating. I'm certainly looking forward to Fyter Fest, and I will likely watch the title versus title thing later on. But even with that title versus title thing, don't you get the impression that they have written themselves into a corner? And if they have, boy, it's going to be painful to watch them squirm. Nobody is questioning whether Fyter Fest is going to be good, but everybody is wondering if NXT will be. And I think that ultimately tells us a lot. This has been Ask Platinum, and I'm Stephen Platinum, your friend in wrestling. Thank you for the questions, by the way. Keep them coming.